I'm Felicity, 32 female. I live in a modest but comfortable two-bedroom apartment in the city, a place I bought with my own hard-earned money. As a senior financial analyst, I've spent the last decade of my life being meticulous, responsible, and forward-thinking. My entire world was built on careful planning and sound decisions, which is why it all came crashing down when my own sister handed me a list of wedding gifts that looked more like a ransom note. Before this story unfolds, I'd love to connect with you. Please let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is in your corner of the world. It's amazing to see how far these stories can travel. My sister Jessica has always lived in a slightly different reality than I have. While I was studying for exams and climbing the corporate ladder, she was curating her online aesthetic and chasing brand sponsorships that never quite materialized. At 26, her official job was a part-time barista, but her real career, in her mind, was being an influencer. She had a few thousand followers who liked her photos of expensive lattes and borrowed designer clothes, and she seemed to believe this translated into a certain status. Her fiancé, Jasper, was a personal trainer. He was a nice enough guy, handsome, fit, and completely mesmerized by my sister. He seemed to support her influencer dreams, often acting as her unpaid photographer. Together, they were a visually appealing couple who, from the outside, looked like they had it all figured out. In reality, they shared a tiny, overpriced apartment and were constantly juggling credit card bills. I always tried to be supportive. I'd helped her with her rent more times than I could count and co-sign the loan for her first car, which she promptly covered in a sparkly pink vinyl wrap. My mother, Susan, a florist with a heart of gold and a tendency to enable, always encouraged my generosity. "She's your little sister, Felicity," she'd say. "She just needs a little boost to get started." The boost had been ongoing for about 8 years. The news of their engagement wasn't a surprise. Jasper proposed during a lavishly staged photo shoot in a public park, complete with a hidden photographer and a drone. The ring, which Jessica flashed in my face the moment she came over, was enormous. A blindingly brilliant diamond that sat on her finger like a small iceberg. "Isn't it perfect?" she sighed, twisting her hand back and forth so the light caught it. "It's beautiful, Jess," I said honestly. "Congratulations, Jasper did well." "He knows what I deserve," she said with a smug smile. That comment should have been my first red flag. Not, "I love him so much," or "I can't wait to spend my life with him," but "he knows what I deserve." The initial wedding planning was a whirlwind of frantic energy, mostly from Jessica. My mom was swept up in the romance of it all, talking about flower arrangements and color palettes. Jessica, however, was talking about venues that cost more than my annual salary and dresses straight off the runway. One evening, about a month after the engagement, my mom invited me over for dinner. Jessica was there, practically vibrating with excitement. She had a pristine white binder with "The Royal Wedding," Jessica and Jasper, embossed in gold leaf on the cover. "Okay, so I have some amazing news," she announced as we sat down. "We've booked the venue. It's the Grand Heritage Ballroom downtown." I nearly choked on my water. The Grand Heritage was where celebrities and political figures held galas. A single plate of food there cost more than my monthly grocery bill. "Jess, that's incredibly expensive. How are you two affording that?" She waved her hand dismissively. "Oh, we're working out the details. We have a budget." She then looked at me, her eyes wide and expectant. "And that's where you come in, my amazing, successful, super genius big sister." My stomach tightened. I knew this was coming. I was the family's designated safety net, the one with the stable job and the savings account. "What do you need, Jess?" "Well," she said, flipping open her binder. "Since you're the maid of honor, you have certain responsibilities, obviously. But more than that, you're my sister. This wedding is a family event, a reflection on all of us. We want it to be perfect." My mom nodded enthusiastically. "Of course we do, sweetie. We'll all pitch in." I looked from my sister's gleaming, expectant face to my mother's soft, supportive one. I can help with the deposit for the caterer, maybe, I offered cautiously. I can probably contribute a few $1,000s. Jessica's smile didn't falter, but it became a little strained. That's so sweet, Felicity. A few thousand will definitely help, but we were thinking more along the lines of a family contribution, a real investment in my future. Before I could ask what that meant, she clapped her hands together. Jasper and I have been talking a lot about our future, starting our lives together, and we realized that traditional wedding gifts are just so outdated. We don't need another toaster or a set of towels. Okay, I said slowly, so you're asking for cash. Not just cash, she said, her voice dropping as if she were revealing a profound secret. We're thinking bigger. We want to start our marriage off on the right foot without any financial stress. We want to build a foundation. She slid a laminated piece of paper across the table. It was titled, Our Dream Foundation Gift List. My eyes scanned the list, and my brain struggled to process what I was seeing. It wasn't a list of household items. It was a list of life-altering assets. At the top of the list, in bold, elegant script, was down payment for a 2-bedroom condo in the Northwood district. Underneath, in parentheses, was the target amount, $150,000. My jaw went slack. The Northwood district was one of the most expensive neighborhoods in the city. I had spent years saving for the down payment on my own modest apartment in a much less trendy area. But it didn't stop there. The list continued. A new car, a specific model of a luxury SUV, complete with a link to the manufacturer's website. Estimated cost, $60,000. Designer wardrobe fund, so Jessica could maintain her brand image as a married woman. Target, $25,000. Honeymoon package, an all-inclusive 2-month trip through Southeast Asia, staying only in 5-star resorts. Target, $30,000. There were smaller items too, if you could call them that. A Peloton bike, a series of designer handbags, and a media equipment upgrade for Jasper's personal training business and Jessica's influencer career. The total value of the items on the list was well over $250,000. I looked up from the paper, convinced this was some kind of elaborate joke. But Jessica was looking at me with the most sincere, hopeful expression I had ever seen. My mom was beaming, as if this was the most reasonable request in the world. Jess, what is this? I finally managed to ask, my voice barely a whisper. It's our registry, she said brightly. Instead of a bunch of little things, we thought it would be better for our closest family, you, Mom, Uncle Owen, to pool your resources and get us something that really matters. Something that will last. I felt a cold wave of disbelief wash over me. She wasn't asking. She was expecting. She looked at me as if I were a walking, talking bank account, a blank check she was finally ready to cash. You're not serious, I said, my voice flat. Her smile faltered. Of course I'm serious. Felicity, you're a financial analyst. You're great with money. You understand investments. This is the best investment you could possibly make in my happiness. My own happiness didn't seem to be a factor in her equation. My years of sacrifice, the long hours at the office, the vacations I'd skipped to build my savings, all of it was just a resource for her to tap into for her fantasy life. I looked at my mom, hoping for a reality check, but she just patted my hand. It's a modern way of doing things, honey. It makes sense. Why waste money on things they don't need? I felt completely untethered, like I had stepped into an alternate universe where asking your sister for an apartment was a normal part of wedding planning. The diamond on Jessica's finger seemed to mock me, a symbol of a life of luxury she felt entitled to but had no intention of earning herself. I knew, in that moment, that this was more than just a wedding. It was a test of every boundary I had ever failed to set. I stared at the laminated Dream Foundation gift list for what felt like an eternity. The glossy finish seemed to make the absurd numbers even more offensive. A condo, a luxury car, a $25,000 clothing allowance. It was a financial plan for a life they hadn't earned, and they expected me to be the primary investor. Jessica, I started, trying to keep my voice even and calm, the way I did when explaining complex market fluctuations to a nervous client. I think we need to talk about what's realistic here. Her cheerful expression hardened instantly. What do you mean, realistic? This is what we need to start our lives. Is my happiness not realistic? Of course it is, I said, trying to backtrack. But this list, Jess, this is more than my entire life savings. I can't just buy you a condo. I'm not asking you to buy it all by yourself, she retorted, gesturing around the table. It's a group gift. You, Mom, Uncle Owen, you all do well. If you pitch in together, it's totally doable. I looked at my mother, Susan, who was nervously rearranging the salt and pepper shakers. Mom, do you think this is reasonable? She wrung her hands. Well, dear, when you put it all together, it does seem like a lot, but Jessica explained it to me. It's about setting them up for success. We want them to be happy and secure, don't we? Secure. Mom, they're booking the most expensive venue in the city for a wedding they can't afford, and now they want us to buy them a luxury apartment and a car. This isn't security, it's a fantasy. Jessica slammed her hand on the table, making the silverware jump. It is not a fantasy. It's my wedding. It's supposed to be the most important day of my life. Why are you trying to ruin it? Ruin it? I'm trying to inject a dose of reality here. My voice was rising, my professional composure cracking. You can't finance a marriage with gifts, Jess. That's not how it works. You and Jasper need to build a life you can actually afford. And what do you know about it? She sneered, her eyes flashing. You just sit in your office all day, counting other people's money. You don't understand dreams. You don't understand what it takes to build a brand. A brand? You're getting married, not launching a Fortune 500 company. My life is my brand, she shrieked. And this wedding is a huge networking opportunity. The pictures, the venue, the story, it's all content. Having a beautiful home and a nice car afterwards is part of that. It shows success. I felt like I was arguing with a child who believed that if you wished for a pony hard enough, one would magically appear in your backyard. The complete and utter disconnect from financial reality was staggering. Jasper, who had been quiet up until now, finally decided to speak. Felicity, we're not asking you to do it all, he said in a placating tone. We just figured you'd be the most excited to help. You've always been so good to Jess. It was a classic manipulation tactic. Frame it as a favor, an act of love, and paint my refusal as a personal failing. I love my sister, Jasper, I said, turning to him. But love doesn't mean funding a lifestyle that is completely unsustainable. What happens after the wedding? After the gift money runs out? Who pays the condo fees, the property taxes, the car insurance? They both stared at me blankly, as if these concepts were foreign to them. We'll figure it out then, Jessica mumbled. The wedding will boost my follower count, and I'll get more brand deals. That was their entire financial plan. A wedding paid for by family, a future funded by Instagram likes. I took a deep breath. Okay, let's set the list aside for a moment. What is your actual budget for this wedding? The venue alone must have a massive deposit. Jessica and Jasper exchanged a nervous glance. We paid it, Jasper said. You paid it? With what money? I asked, genuinely confused. I knew for a fact they had less than $1,000 in their joint savings account. We used our credit cards, Jessica said defiantly. It's an investment. You put a $50,000 venue deposit on credit cards? I asked, horrified. Jess, the interest on that alone will cripple you. Not if we pay it off quickly, she said, looking pointedly at me. With the wedding gift money. The puzzle pieces clicked into place. This wasn't just about getting a head start. They had already spent money they didn't have, assuming, no, expecting, that I and the rest of the family would bail them out under the guise of wedding gifts. The Dream Foundation gift list wasn't a wish list, it was a bill. They had already decided how my money was to be spent. My shock turned into a cold, hard anger. This wasn't just entitlement, it was a premeditated financial ambush. "No," I said, my voice firm and final. "Absolutely not." Jessica's face crumpled. "No, what do you mean no?" "I mean no. I am not paying off your credit card debt, and I am not buying you a condo or a car. That is not my responsibility. It is financial insanity, and I will not be a part of it." "But you're my maid of honor," she wailed. "You're supposed to help me." "Helping you doesn't mean bankrupting myself for your delusions of grandeur," I shot back. "A maid of honor helps you choose a dress and plans a bachelorette party. She doesn't take out a second mortgage on her home to fund your influencer lifestyle." The tears started to flow. Big, dramatic crocodile tears that I knew were designed to make me feel guilty. My mother immediately rushed to her side, wrapping her in a hug and glaring at me. "Felicity, how can you be so cruel?" my mother said, her voice trembling. "Look what you've done to your sister. She's just trying to have a nice wedding." "Mom, this isn't nice. This is financial self-destruction," I pleaded, looking for some semblance of sanity in her eyes. "You can't possibly think this is okay." "She's just emotional," Susan said, stroking Jessica's hair. "Planning a wedding is stressful. You're the one with the head for numbers, Felicity. You should be helping her figure it out, not attacking her." I felt utterly alone. They were a united front of fantasy, and I was the villain for speaking the truth. They didn't want a financial analyst, they wanted a financier. They didn't want advice, they wanted my bank account. I stood up from the table, my hands shaking with anger and disappointment. "I can't have this conversation right now. You are both completely detached from reality." I grabbed my purse and walked towards the door. Jessica's sobs followed me. "You'll regret this, Felicity," she screamed after me. "You're just jealous. You're jealous that I'm getting married and that I'm going to have a beautiful life." I stopped at the door and turned back, my heart aching. "I'm not jealous, Jess. I'm terrified for you." And with that, I left, the sound of her crying echoing in my ears. I knew this was far from over. This was just the first battle in a war I never wanted to fight. The gift list was a declaration, and I had just declared my opposition. The week after the disastrous dinner was filled with a suffocating silence. No calls, no texts, not even an angry emoji sent my way. I knew it was the calm before the storm. Jessica was likely regrouping, marshaling her forces, namely, my mother and any other relative who would listen to her tearful, edited version of our conversation. I tried to focus on work, burying myself in spreadsheets and market projections. Numbers made sense. They were logical, predictable. They didn't throw tantrums or demand you buy them a condo, but the knot in my stomach remained. My Uncle Owen was the first to reach out. He was my late father's brother, a sharp and successful real estate agent who had always been a grounding force in our family. He called me on a Thursday evening. "Felicity," he began without any preamble, "your mother called me. She told me about some disagreement over wedding gifts." "Disagreement is a gentle way of putting it, Uncle Owen," I sighed, rubbing my temples. "Jess and Jasper presented me with a list of demands that included a six-figure down payment on a condo." There was a pause on the other end of the line, followed by a short, dry chuckle. "A condo, huh? Let me guess, in Northwood." "You got it in one." "She called me too," he said, his tone turning more serious. "She was crying, said you were being unsupportive and trying to ruin her big day. Then she sent me the list. I told her I'd have to sell my own house to afford a single item on it." A wave of relief washed over me. Finally, another sane person. "Thank you. I felt like I was losing my mind. Mom is completely on her side." "Your mother has always had a blind spot when it comes to Jessica," he said. "She sees a dreamer. I see a 26-year-old with no concept of money. But this is a new level of delusion. They've already booked the Grand Heritage Ballroom, you know." "I know. They put the deposit on credit cards." Owen let out a low whistle. "They're in over their heads, way over. What are you planning to do?" I told them no, I'm not funding this. I offered to give them a few $1,000s as a gift, a normal gift, and they treated it like an insult. "Good for you for holding your ground," he said. "It's not your job to finance their life. Don't let them guilt you." His support was the validation I desperately needed. But the real confrontation was yet to come. It arrived 2 days later, on a Saturday morning. My doorbell rang, and I found Jessica and my mother standing on my doorstep. Jessica's eyes were red and puffy, and my mom had a look of grim determination on her face. They didn't wait for an invitation, just pushed past me into my living room. "We need to talk," my mom said, her voice firm. "I think we said everything that needed to be said the other night," I replied, crossing my arms. "No, you didn't," Jessica snapped. "You didn't listen, you just attacked me." "I didn't attack you, Jess. I refuse to be your personal ATM." My mom stepped between us. "Felicity, that is enough. Your sister is under an immense amount of pressure. This is a once-in-a-lifetime event, and she just wants her family's support. Is that too much to ask?" "Supporting her and enabling her are two different things, Mom," I said, my patience wearing thin. "She is on a path to financial ruin, and you are cheering her on from the sidelines." "It is my wedding, and I will have it the way I want it." Jessica's voice escalated into a familiar shriek. "And I need my family to help me make it happen. I need you to help me." She looked at me, her expression shifting from anger to a calculated, pleading look. "Flick, please," she said, using my childhood nickname. "I know the list was a shock, but we can be flexible. If you can't handle the whole condo down payment, maybe you could just buy us the car or cover the honeymoon. We need something significant." The audacity was breathtaking. She was trying to negotiate, as if we were in a business deal and a $60,000 luxury SUV was a reasonable compromise. "Jess, listen to me very carefully," I said, my voice low and steady. "The answer is no. It's not a negotiation. I am not buying you a car or a honeymoon or a down payment on a condo. I will give you a check for $5,000. You can use it for whatever you want. That is my wedding gift to you. It is generous, it is more than appropriate, and it is final." For a moment, she just stared at me, her mouth hanging open. The color drained from her face, replaced by a blotchy, furious red. $5,000, she whispered, as if I had just spit in her face. $5,000. Do you know how much the floral arrangements for one table at my venue cost? $5,000 is nothing. It's an insult. "It's a gift, Jessica," I exclaimed. "A gift, it's not an obligation or a payment." "No," she screamed, stamping her foot like a toddler. "No, you don't get to do this. You don't get to decide what you give me. This is my wedding." My mother tried to calm her down, but Jessica was beyond reason. She was in a full-blown narcissistic rage. "You have all this money, and you're just hoarding it," she accused, gesturing wildly around my apartment. "This place, your fancy job, you could help me, and you're choosing not to. You're selfish." "It's my money, Jess," I said, my own anger flaring. "I earned it. I worked for it. You think you're entitled to it, but you are not." That was it, the final straw. Her face twisted into a mask of pure fury. "Fine," she hissed, her voice dropping to a dangerously low level. "If my own sister won't support me, if you think $5,000 is enough to buy your way into my wedding, then you're wrong." She took a step closer, her eyes boring into mine. "You want to give me a check? Then send it in the mail. Because if you're not going to help me get what I need, if you won't buy me a real gift from the list, then don't even bother coming to my wedding." The words hung in the air, sharp and heavy. My mother gasped, looking from Jessica to me in horror. "Jess, don't say that," my mom pleaded. "I mean it," Jessica screamed, tears of rage streaming down her face. "You want to stand by and watch me struggle? You want to be a guest instead of my sister? Then don't even come. I don't want you there." She was disinviting me from her wedding, her own sister, her maid of honor, because I refused to buy her a car. A strange sense of calm washed over me. The anger, the frustration, the hurt, it all evaporated, replaced by a cold, clear certainty. This was the line. She had drawn it herself. I looked her straight in the eye. Okay, I said quietly. Jessica faltered. What? Okay, I repeated. If that's your choice, I'll respect it. I won't come to the wedding. The shock on her face was almost comical. She had expected me to beg, to plead, to break down and write her a check for whatever she wanted. She had used the ultimate threat, and I had just accepted it. Her most powerful weapon was a dud. You can't be serious, she stammered. You just disinvited me, Jessica. I'm accepting your decision. Felicity, no, my mom said, her voice filled with panic. She doesn't mean it, she's just upset. She seemed pretty clear to me, I said, not taking my eyes off my sister. Jessica stood there, speechless, her ultimatum having backfired spectacularly. She had gambled that my love for her and my desire for family peace was greater than my own self-respect. She had gambled wrong. Without another word, she turned and stormed out of my apartment, slamming the door behind her. My mother lingered for a moment, her face a mess of confusion and distress. You have to fix this, Felicity, she whispered. No, Mom, I said, my voice tired but firm. I don't, she made her choice. Now she can live with it. After Jessica stormed out and I accepted her ultimatum, a new phase of the war began, the information war. My mother, unable to accept the situation, became a reluctant go-between, and through her, I started to piece together the narrative Jessica was spinning for the rest of the family. It was a masterpiece of fiction. According to Jess, she had simply asked for a little help, and I, in a fit of jealousy over her happiness, had callously refused and thrown her out of my apartment. She claimed I had belittled her, called her dreams stupid, and said she didn't deserve a nice wedding. The Dream Foundation gift list was conveniently omitted from her retelling. In her story, she was the victim, and I was the cruel, unfeeling villain. Relatives I hadn't spoken to in months started calling. My Aunt Sarah called to tell me that family is more important than money, and that I should apologize. A cousin I barely knew sent me a passive-aggressive text about being there for your sister on her big day. Jessica and Jasper were painting me as a monster, and because her version was more dramatic, people were buying it. I decided my best strategy was silence. Arguing or defending myself would only add fuel to the fire. I had told my side to the one person who mattered, Uncle Owen, and he was firmly in my corner. For everyone else, I just let their calls go to voicemail. My curiosity, however, got the better of me. How were they still planning this ridiculously extravagant wedding without my financial backing? The credit card deposit was just the beginning. The Grand Heritage Ballroom required the full balance to be paid 30 days before the event. Then there was the couture gown, the celebrity photographer, the 10-piece band, all of which required substantial deposits. As a financial analyst, I'm naturally inquisitive and good at finding information. I didn't do anything illegal, but I did some light social media sleuthing and paid attention to the bits and pieces of information my mother let slip. The first thing I noticed was Jessica's Instagram feed. It had transformed from occasional latte art to a full-blown chronicle of opulent wedding planning. There were posts of her sipping champagne at exclusive bridal boutiques, photos of elaborate floral mock-ups with captions like "Go big or go home," "Dream wedding," and stories of her and Jasper test-driving luxury cars for their grand exit. It was all a carefully constructed illusion. She was tagging vendors, hoping for discounts in exchange for exposure, but I knew for a fact that most of these high-end businesses didn't operate that way. She was living the fantasy online, but reality was a different story. My mom unintentionally gave me the next clue. During one of her daily, "You need to fix this" calls, she mentioned something in passing. I don't know why you're so worried about their finances, Felicity. Jasper said he got a huge commission bonus at work, and that's covering most of the deposits. That struck me as odd. Jasper was a junior sales associate at a mid-range gym equipment company. A huge bonus for him would be a few $1,000s, not the tens of thousands they were spending. A quick look at his public professional profile on a networking site showed his company hadn't had a great quarter. In fact, they had recently announced layoffs. A massive bonus seemed highly unlikely. The lies were starting to stack up. The biggest revelation came from Uncle Owen. He called me about 2 months before the wedding date. "You're not going to believe this," he said, his voice a mixture of amusement and disbelief. I was reviewing some pre-approval applications at work, and guess whose names popped up? "No," I breathed. "Oh yes, Jessica and Jasper. They applied for a mortgage for a condo in Northwood." My heart sank. Did they get it? "Of course not," he scoffed. "Their combined income barely qualifies them to rent a garage apartment, let alone buy a $1 million condo. Their credit scores are abysmal, and they have a mountain of debt. But that's not the interesting part. On their application, under Assets and Expected Financial Gifts, they listed a guaranteed family contribution of $200,000. I was speechless. They listed my gift on a legal document after I explicitly said no. They listed it as coming from the family estate, Owen explained. They were trying to leverage a non-existent inheritance and a gift you refused to give to secure a loan they could never hope to repay. The loan officer flagged it as potential fraud. This was beyond simple entitlement. This was calculated, premeditated deception. They weren't just dreamers, they were con artists, and their primary target was their own family. They were funding their lavish wedding by taking out more and more debt, opening new credit cards, and possibly even taking out personal loans, all under the assumption that the wedding gift money would magically appear and wipe the slate clean. They were building a financial house of cards, and they expected me to be the foundation. My decision to stay away from the wedding solidified from a point of self-respect into a necessary act of self-preservation. Getting involved now wouldn't be helping. It would be co-signing their financial ruin. A few weeks later, I got a call from a frantic Susan. "Felicity, you have to help. The final payment for the venue is due next week, and Jessica just told me they're a little short." "A little short?" I asked calmly. "How much is a little short, Mom?" She hesitated. $30,000. $30,000, I repeated, the number feeling absurd on my tongue. "And where did all of Jasper's bonus money go?" "Well, there was the dress, and the non-refundable deposit for the month-long honeymoon in Bali, and Jasper bought a new watch." Her voice trailed off. They were living like millionaires on a budget of monopoly money. They had spent every dime they could borrow on the accessories of a wealthy lifestyle, completely ignoring the foundational costs. "Mom, I am not giving them $30,000, I said. "But they'll lose the venue and all the deposits," she cried. "The wedding will be ruined." "Then maybe the wedding shouldn't be happening at the Grand Heritage Ballroom," I said gently. "Maybe it should be happening at a place they can actually afford. It's not too late for them to cancel, downsize, and do something responsible." "Don't you say that," she sobbed. "You are being so hateful. This is your sister's dream." "A dream is not an excuse to commit financial suicide and expect others to foot the bill." "LL," I said, my patience gone. "My answer is still no. They got themselves into this mess. They can get themselves out." I hung up the phone, my heart heavy but my resolve unshaken. The web of lies they had spun was beginning to unravel, and the first threads were snapping. The wedding was a month away, and the financial reality was about to come crashing down on them. I wondered if they would cancel, or if their delusion was strong enough to find another, more desperate solution. The weeks leading up to the wedding were a masterclass in emotional manipulation. After I refused to give my mom the $30,000 for the venue, the pressure campaign escalated dramatically. It was a full court press from every angle. First came the guilt trips from my mother. She would call me daily, her voice thick with tears, telling me how Jessica wasn't eating, how she cried herself to sleep every night, how this beautiful dream was turning into a nightmare, all because of my stubbornness. She painted a picture of a heartbroken bride and me as the wicked witch who had shattered her glass slipper. "She's your only sister," she'd say. "How can you live with yourself if you let her wedding fall apart?" "Her wedding isn't falling apart because of me, Mom," I'd reply, the words feeling worn out from repetition. "It's falling apart because it was built on a foundation of debt and lies." When the guilt trips didn't work, Jessica tried a different tactic: love bombing. Suddenly, my phone was flooded with old photos of us as kids, at the beach on Christmas morning at my high school graduation. They came with texts like, "Remember how we always had each other's backs? I miss my best friend." And, "No matter what, you'll always be my big sister and I love you." It was a transparent, cynical attempt to play on my emotions, to make me forget the condo and the car and the ultimatum. She was trying to remind me of the sister she used to be, hoping it would make me pay for the bride she had become. It was insulting. My love for her wasn't a commodity to be traded for a luxury SUV. I didn't respond to any of them. Then came the final, most desperate phase, the smear campaign. When guilt and love failed, they turned to anger and slander. Jessica began telling extended family that I had always been jealous of her, that I was bitter about her finding love, and that I was using my money to control and punish her. She told them I had a history of being selfish, and that this was just the latest example. This was the part that hurt the most. It wasn't just about the wedding anymore. She was actively trying to poison my relationships with the rest of our family, rewriting our entire history to fit her narrative. Through it all, I remained silent and steadfast. I had drawn my line in the sand. My refusal to fund her wedding had become a non-negotiable principle. It was about more than just the money. It was about refusing to enable a destructive pattern of behavior. It was about demanding a baseline of respect. It was about protecting my own financial and emotional well-being. The official wedding invitation arrived in the mail, a thick, cream-colored card with gold calligraphy. My name was printed on it, without the title of maid of honor. It felt like a test, a final passive-aggressive prod to see if I would cave. I placed it on my counter and never sent back the RSVP. 2 weeks before the wedding, Uncle Owen called me. "Are you sitting down?" he asked. "I'm always sitting down when you call these days," I replied. "What is it now?" "They found the money," he said. "The final payment for the venue went through." My stomach dropped. "How? Where did they get $30,000? "I did some digging," he said. His voice was grim. "Susan took out a home equity loan against her house." I felt the air leave my lungs. My mother's house. The house my father had worked his entire life to pay off. The only significant asset she had to her name. She had put her own financial future at risk for Jessica's fantasy wedding. "She promised me she wouldn't do that," I whispered, feeling a profound sense of betrayal. "We talked about it years ago. That house is her retirement." "Well, Jessica and Jasper must have put on the performance of a lifetime," Owen said bitterly. "They convinced her it was just a short-term loan, and that the wedding gift money would pay it all back immediately." This was the point of no return. My mother had been my biggest frustration in this whole ordeal, but I had always believed she was just naive, blinded by her love for her daughter. But this was different. This was a catastrophic financial decision, and she had made it behind my back, knowing full well that I, the financial analyst in the family, would have vehemently opposed it. I hung up the phone with my uncle and felt a profound shift inside me. The anger and frustration I had felt for weeks crystallized into a cold, hard resolve. They had made their choice. My mother had chosen to gamble her security on her daughter's entitlement. Jessica had chosen a party over her sister. I walked over to my desk and pulled out a card and a pen. I wrote a short, simple note. "Dear Jessica and Jasper, wishing you all the best on your wedding day and in your future together. With love, Felicity." I enclosed the check for $5,000, the original gift I had offered. It wasn't a peace offering. It wasn't me caving. It was a final, formal gesture. It was me closing the book on this chapter of our relationship. It was a gift, given freely, with no expectation of anything in return, not a thank you, not an apology, and certainly not an invitation. I sealed the envelope and dropped it in the mail. Then I did something I should have done months ago. I blocked Jessica's number. I blocked Jasper's number. And with a heavy heart, I blocked my mother's number. It wasn't done out of spite. It was an act of boundary setting. I needed to remove myself from the emotional vortex they had created. I could no longer be their audience, their villain, or their emergency fund. I needed silence. I booked a flight to a small coastal town for the weekend of the wedding. I planned to hike, read a book on the beach, and drink wine. I was officially, completely, and unapologetically boycotting my sister's wedding. I was choosing my own peace over their manufactured drama. It was the loneliest decision I had ever made, but I knew, with absolute certainty, that it was the right one. The day of the wedding arrived, and I woke up in a sun-drenched hotel room with a view of the ocean. The air smelled of salt and freedom. My phone, for the first time in months, was silent. No frantic calls, no manipulative texts, no passive-aggressive photo memories. The quiet was blissful. I spent the morning hiking along a coastal cliff trail, the sound of the waves crashing below drowning out the lingering whispers of guilt and what-ifs. I had imagined this day would be difficult, that I'd be racked with regret. But as the sun climbed higher, I felt only a profound sense of peace. I had made my choice, and I was living with it. I was okay. Around 3 p.m., the time the ceremony was scheduled to begin, I was sitting on a secluded beach, reading a novel. My mind wandered for a moment, and I pictured it. The Grand Heritage Ballroom, dripping with my mother's flowers, filled with relatives who probably thought I was a terrible person. I pictured Jessica in her ridiculously expensive dress, walking down the aisle towards a future built on a mountain of debt. I felt a pang of sadness for her, for the mess she had made, but it was a detached sadness, like watching a movie about someone I used to know. I had left strict instructions with my friends and with Uncle Owen. I did not want updates. I did not want pictures. I wanted to be completely disconnected from the event. Owen, true to his word, respected my wishes. He had decided to attend, not to celebrate, but to be a witness and to support my mother, who he knew was in a fragile state. My phone remained off for the entire day. I ate dinner alone at a seaside restaurant, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. I raised a glass of wine to myself, a silent toast to self-preservation. I flew home late Sunday night, feeling rested and clear-headed. When I walked back into my apartment, the silence that greeted me was a welcome comfort. I turned my phone back on, bracing myself for the inevitable flood of notifications. There were a few missed calls from distant relatives, likely calling to either gloat or express their disappointment in me. There were a few texts from friends, checking in to see how I was doing. But there was nothing from my mother or Jessica. The silence from their end was absolute. It wasn't until Monday afternoon that I heard from Uncle Owen. He called me at work. "So," he said, his voice heavy, "you missed quite the event." "I'm sure I did," I replied evenly. "How was it?" "Visually stunning," he said. "Your mother's flower arrangements were beautiful. Jessica's dress was large. The food was mediocre and cold, but the atmosphere incredibly tense. Your absence was the guest of honor." "I imagine it was," I said. "Everyone was talking about it," he continued. "The story, as I heard it from your Aunt Sarah, was that you had a sudden work emergency and were devastated to miss it. Jessica was playing the part of the gracious, understanding sister, telling everyone how she knew you'd be there in spirit." I snorted. "Of course she did. Can't let the truth ruin a good party." "Exactly, but here's where it gets interesting." During the reception, the speeches started. Jasper's best man gave a typical embarrassing speech. The maid of honor, some friend of Jessica's from her yoga class, gushed for 10 minutes. Then Jasper got up to thank everyone. Owen paused for dramatic effect. He thanked everyone for their love, their support, and their incredible generosity. Then he said, and I quote, "Thanks to our amazing family, especially our wonderful parents Susan and the late Michael, and my incredible new sister-in-law Felicity, We are starting our life together on solid ground, debt-free, and ready for our 2-month honeymoon in Bali. The blood drained from my face. He said my name. He specifically thanked me for making them debt-free. He did, in front of 200 people. He held up a champagne glass and toasted you. Your mother was beaming. Jessica was crying tears of joy. It was a disgusting performance. They had cashed my check, then publicly lied and credited me with funding Thay. Our entire sham. They were using my name and my reputation to sell their story of success to the world, all while knowing the truth. The audacity was on a whole other level. "What did you do?" I asked, my voice shaking with rage. "I stayed quiet," he said. "It wasn't the time or place, but I watched people's faces. A few of our relatives who know you well, who know how sensible you are, they looked confused. They know you wouldn't just hand over a blank check." The lie was a little too big to be believable. The wedding day silence was now explained. They weren't calling me because they were angry. They were calling me because they had already won in their minds. They had their party, they had my mother's money, and they had a fabricated story where I was a generous benefactor. They had gotten everything they wanted. They left for their 2-month Bali honeymoon the next day, flooding social media with pictures of infinity pools, floating breakfasts, and sunset yoga sessions. The captions were full of hashtags like blessed, #best family, and debt-free. It was a sickening victory lap. While they were gone, my mother and I maintained our radio silence. She didn't reach out, and neither did I. Uncle Owen told me she was convinced that once Jessica got back, they would sit down with the gift money, which she believed was a massive sum from various relatives, anchored by my fictitious contribution, and pay off her home equity loan immediately. She was living in the same fantasy world as her daughter. I, on the other hand, was living in reality, and I knew that the bill for that perfect wedding was about to come due. The silence of the wedding day was just a temporary reprieve. The real storm was still gathering on the horizon. Jessica and Jasper returned from their 2-month honeymoon with tans, thousands of photos, and the same delusional sense of entitlement they had left with. They moved back into their tiny, expensive apartment, and the reality of the life they had financed with debt began to set in. The social media posts slowed down, replaced by a tense quiet. The first crack in the facade appeared about a month after their return. My mother called me for the first time in nearly 4 months. Her voice was small and hesitant. "Felicity, it's Mom." "I know," I said coolly. I was wondering if you could come over for dinner this weekend. I think it's time we all talked." "Is there something specific to talk about?" I asked, unwilling to be drawn into another ambush. She took a shaky breath. "It's about the loan, the home equity loan. I spoke with Jessica, and there seems to have been a misunderstanding about the gift money." The misunderstanding was that the gift money didn't exist. The $5,000 I sent was likely the largest single cash gift they received. The rest of their guests had brought toasters and towels. There was no magical pot of gold to pay off my mother's loan or their maxed-out credit cards. "I'm busy this weekend," I said flatly, "but I'm happy to give you the name of a good financial advisor, Mom. It sounds like you need one." I refused to be the family fixer. This was a mess of their own making. My mother had made a terrible decision against my advice, and now she had to face the consequences. The full extent of the disaster became clear over the next few weeks, mostly through Uncle Owen, who had become the family's unwilling crisis manager. The first domino to fall was the credit card companies. With no massive influx of cash, Jessica and Jasper defaulted on their payments. The interest rates skyrocketed. Collection agencies started calling, not just them, but my mother as well, as she had foolishly co-signed on one of the cards they used for a wedding expense. Then came the luxury car they had leased in anticipation of their new, rich life. They couldn't make the payments, and it was repossessed in the middle of the night, a quiet humiliation in their trendy apartment complex. The biggest blow, however, was the home equity loan. The introductory period ended, and the monthly payments ballooned to an amount my mother, living on a fixed retirement income, simply could not afford. She was at risk of losing the house my father had left her. It was then that the truth finally, painfully, came out. My mother, in a state of sheer panic, confronted Jessica. She demanded to know where the gift money was, where Jasper's huge bonus had gone, and why she was getting calls from debt collectors. According to Owen, who was there for the confrontation, Jessica completely broke down. The influencer facade crumbled, revealing a terrified, immature woman drowning in debt. She admitted everything. There was no bonus. There was no massive pile of wedding gifts. They had lied about everything, assuming I would eventually cave and write them a check to cover it all. Their entire plan had hinged on my eventual surrender, my refusal to attend the wedding and my subsequent. Silence had been a variable they never planned for. The fallout was catastrophic. My mother was devastated, not just by the financial peril, but by the depth of her daughter's deception. She finally saw that I wasn't the villain. I was the only one who had tried to stop the train from going off the rails. The rest of the family, who had been fed Jessica's narrative of the jealous sister, were now confronted with the ugly truth. They learned about the Dream Foundation gift list, the lies about the mortgage application, and the fact that Jessica had disinvited me after I refused to buy her a car. The story they had been told was a lie, and they had all been complicit in shunning me. The apologies started trickling in. A text from Aunt Sarah, "I am so sorry, Felicity, we should have listened to you." A voicemail from a cousin, stammering an apology for his judgmental text. But the most significant call came from my mother. She was sobbing so hard I could barely understand her. "You were right," she cried. "You were right about everything and I didn't listen. I was so caught up in the fantasy, I've ruined everything. I might lose the house." My heart ached for her, but my resolve didn't waver. "I will help you, Mom," I said, my voice gentle but firm. "I will help you find a lawyer and a financial advisor. We will figure out a budget. We might have to sell the house and downsize, but I will not let you be homeless. But I am not giving you a lump sum of money to fix this. You have to walk through this process. You have to understand the consequences." It was the hardest conversation of my life, but it was necessary. I helped her consolidate her debts and create a strict budget. We ultimately had to sell the family home, a painful but necessary step. She moved into a small, manageable apartment, her retirement severely impacted but not entirely gone.